What is going on, everyone? It is Connor, the co-host with the most, back here with another episode on the Clutch Crew Sports YouTube channel. And this is going to be the first episode in a 5-episode series that will be previewing the 2022 NHL season. Basically, each week I'm going to go over one of the 4 divisions. I'm going to be starting with the Central Division here in this video and previewing the standings. These videos are going to be kind of similar to our college football preview videos, so giving my divisional predictions and previewing each team in each division for the upcoming NHL season. That will be the first 4 episodes covering each of the 4 divisions. And then the 5th episode, which will come out on October 12th, which is the day after the season starts, I will be giving my official Stanley Cup Finals prediction, my Eastern and Western Conference Finals predictions, as well as all of my award predictions as who's going to win all of those. But we're going to start here with the Central Division. I'm less familiar with the Western Conference than I am the Eastern Conference, so I figured I'll start with the West. And let's get right into it. This division obviously houses the defending Stanley Cup champion, Colorado Avalanche. This is definitely a division where there's a bit of a gap between a lot of the teams. There's definitely a big gap between the lower tier and the upper tier for the most part. So let's get right into it here. Obviously, no surprise here. At number 8, we have the Arizona Coyotes. So basically, for each of these teams, I'm going to have where they finished in the standings last year. I'm also going to have a little section about the last time they made the playoffs, as well as the last time they won the division, and how they did each time they made the playoffs. As a little bit of a side note, for any team that made the playoffs in 2019-2020, because that was the COVID year with the bubble, as long as they made it out of the qualifying round, I'm counting it if that was the last time they made it. If they lost in the qualifying round, I'm not counting that as a playoff appearance because, there were a lot of extra teams that got opportunities to make the playoffs that time around. So as long as they made it out of the qualifying round, it counts. I'm also, for each team, going to be going over one key addition they made in the offseason, one key piece that they lost in the offseason, and then which player on their team has the best chance to challenge for the Hart Trophy, which is, for those who are unfamiliar, the MVP award for the NHL. So like I said, no surprise here at number 8, we have the Arizona Coyotes. They were last in the division last year with 57 points to their name, 50 losses, just a really horrible season for Arizona. Arizona, of course, has all the stuff going on now about how they're going to be playing in the Arizona State Hockey Arena, which only houses like 5,000 people. And, just really bad things going on in Arizona. Arizona's never really been the biggest hockey city to begin with. And now with all the drama that's going around with them trying to get a new arena and all this stuff going on, if I was doing a video about teams that really needed to relocate, the Arizona Coyotes would be at the top of that. I don't know why the NHL insists on keeping them in Arizona. I'm sure Quebec or, some other places would like a hockey team, and Arizona's getting it. So, but the Coyotes, so the last time they made the playoffs was that 2019-2020 season. They were able to come out of the qualifying round, but they did lose in the first round to the Avalanche that time around. And the last time that they won the Central Division was, their last division crown, not necessarily Central Division crown, but their last division crown in total was back in 2011-2012, where they did make a run to the conference finals, but they did lose to the eventual Stanley Cup champion LA Kings. So it's been a while since the Coyotes have had any real sustained success. But let's look at their moves here. Their key addition for me is going to be Patrick Nemeth, a bit of a depth defenseman on the New York Rangers. The Coyotes didn't really make any big moves. You'll kind of notice this is a trend for the teams that are on the lower end of this list. Teams that didn't really make a whole lot of big moves, like big additions. They lost a lot more than they gained. But I just put Patrick Nemeth here. He seemed like the biggest addition for them. He's just going to be another depth defenseman. He's not going to be, no big splash, no one who's going to really put up a huge amount of points or anything. But it's really just, for them to get like a third-line defenseman here. Their biggest loss in the offseason, no doubt, is Phil Kessel. Kessel, he's been with the organization for a while now. He's, for a long time, been probably like one of their best, if not their best player. He's a great leader for this team. He came over after winning 2 Stanley Cups with the Pittsburgh Penguins. So just a big loss for them. I know it was probably a good move on their part, just to, you don't want to start getting in the habit of giving aging veterans lots of contracts and everything. You want to cut them while you can. So overall, probably a good move for them to let Kessel go, but obviously, for the team's point of view and their success, it's not a good move. So, but overall, I would rate that as a good move, getting rid of Phil Kessel. Moving over to their player that has the best chance to win the Hart Trophy, I'm going to give it to Clayton Keller. Should be no surprise here. He's been the best player on the struggling team for a while now. He's really taken over as kind of like their good young presence and hope for the future. It's important to keep in mind that these players, that while they may have the best chance of winning the Hart Trophy of any player on this team, Clayton Keller really has no chance in my mind, unless he just absolutely breaks out and has a tremendous season, which part of that is also dependent on the teammates around him, which the Coyotes don't have good teammates around him for the most part. So, it's just not going to happen for him on the grand stage. But, I like to take a look at just the best player on the team. So, Clayton Keller is going to be who I'm going to go with here. But the Coyotes, they should be bottom dwellers in the Central Division again. No surprise here. They were one of the worst teams last year in the whole league, and they're looking like they're going to be another one of the worst teams this year, especially with all the relocation drama, or just the arena drama and everything that's going on with them. So moving on to the 7th place team here, we have the Chicago Blackhawks. They were 7th in the division last year, 68 points overall. You can definitely tell there was a huge gap between 6th and 7th. 6th place Winnipeg at 89 points and Chicago at 68. So definitely the Blackhawks and the Coyotes were for sure the worst teams in this division last year. The Blackhawks are definitely headed for a rebuild. Their last playoff season was the 2019-2020 playoffs, where they lost to Vegas in the first round. Their last division crown came back in 2016-2017 when they lost in the first round to Nashville. That was a couple of years after their last Stanley Cup in 2015. Like I said, the Blackhawks, they're kind of in rebuild mode. They're not really, this is a franchise that, of course, has expectations given that they've won 3 Stanley Cups since 2010. But, they haven't really been in contention for one since that last Stanley Cup they won in 2015. They've never really gotten back to that point where everyone thought, oh, the Blackhawks are a real contender this year. It's been a while since they've been like that. Looking at their addition and loss, their key addition for me is going to be Max Domi from the Carolina Hurricanes. Domi, he had some decent performances when he was with Carolina last year. He got traded. He got picked up at the trade deadline by the Hurricanes from Columbus. And he did a decent job. His defense definitely was suspect at times, but he did score some crucial goals for them in the playoffs. He notably had 2 goals for them in that Game 7 against the Boston Bruins. So Domi's going to be a good kind of depth piece for them, like a second or third line forward for them. But obviously, more prevalent here is the big loss for them, which is Alex DeBrincat, a good young rising star. And this is really where the evidence is that Chicago is in tank mode. They're in tank mode, rebuild mode, whatever you want to call it. No way would a team that's actually trying to have any success would let Alex DeBrincat go, but they did let him go. There's been a lot of talk that the Blackhawks, there's been so many rumors that have been swirling around ever since then that, the Blackhawks are looking to trade Patrick Kane. It's probably a likely outcome that they're going to be getting rid of Jonathan Toews in the upcoming years. So Chicago is in full burn it down mode and rebuild. That being said, if he does stay with the team, no doubt in my mind that their best Hart Trophy candidate is Patrick Kane. He's been the best player on this squad for a long time. And like I said, it's going to be all up to if they trade him or not. There's been rumors circulating, like I said, for a long time. I don't know where it really stands on how much progress they've made with other teams, as if they're going to, really be able to trade him here before the season starts, or if it's going to happen in the middle of the season, maybe at the deadline. But, I know Chicago's really wanting to offload him. They're going to want to offload Jonathan Toews as well. So definitely going to be a rough season for the Chicago Blackhawks. This is a fan base, like I said, that's used to having expectations, but don't get your hopes up too much this time around, Blackhawks fans. So moving on to the number 6 team here, we're going to have the Winnipeg Jets, who also finished in 6th in the division last year with 89 points. They were contending for the playoffs for a little bit, but they definitely fell out of it towards the end of the year. Their last playoff season was in 2020-2021 when they lost in the second round to the eventual Western Conference champion Montreal Canadiens. That was the year that Montreal went on their Cinderella run and made it to the Stanley Cup against Tampa. So that was the last time. That was back when Winnipeg in that season, they were in the North Division with all the other Canadian teams because the Canadian teams had COVID restrictions. And, the U.S. teams couldn't go into Canada that year. So that was the last time they made the playoffs. They obviously missed it last year. This is a team that has never won a division crown since, they came back. There was an original Winnipeg Jets team that eventually relocated to Arizona and became the now Arizona Coyotes. Probably should have stayed in Winnipeg. And then, of course, this Winnipeg team was born in 2011 when the Atlanta Thrashers moved to Winnipeg. But I've got them finishing 6th here. This is a team, for me, they didn't really make any moves in the offseason at all. This is definitely a team that I was trying to find, what was like a good piece that they added during the offseason. And, I didn't really find anything super good. Like I said, there's a reason why these teams are at the bottom. They didn't really add any like major pieces in the offseason to be like, oh wow, like this is going to be the piece that's going to, carry them forward to a playoff spot, or for some of the upper crust teams like a Stanley Cup. But there wasn't anything really like that for the Jets. I expect another season. Like they're definitely going to be at least 6th. They could probably slip into 5th if everything goes right. But this is definitely in my mind where they're at right now. I just think the top 5 teams are a class above them. The top 5 teams are going to be competing for the playoff spot, and the Jets, while they're definitely far from the worst team in this division, they're definitely not the best either. So looking at their their key addition for me was Kevin Stunlin from the Columbus Blue Jackets. He another kind of piece here that's like another depth piece, kind of like Max Domi, just had a decent season, like an okay season last year, but he's definitely more of like a third line forward. Their big loss for me is going to be Eric Comrie, their backup goaltender. Connor Hellebuyck obviously is a really good goaltender, but every team needs a good backup goaltender, and whenever you have to change up anything in your goaltender rotation, there's definitely a lot of uncertainty that goes on there. I know, speaking as a Hurricanes fan, there was a lot of uncertainty that we had at the goaltender position last year. It worked out great for us, but, there's still question marks as well whenever you change anything up at any part of your goaltending rotation, whether it be the starting rotation or the backup. So that definitely is their biggest loss for me. Their most likely Hart Trophy candidate is, of course, going to be Kyle Connor. He was an all-star last year, one of the fastest skaters in the league from what I've seen. I haven't seen too many Winnipeg Jets games, but so he's super fast. He's got great scoring ability. He's definitely the star on this Winnipeg Jets team. And he's going to be a key reason. Him and Blake Wheeler and some of the other pieces on this team are going to have to be the reason if Winnipeg wants to push for that playoff spot. Because if they do make the playoffs, to me, it's going to have to be a wild card. I really don't see them, like I said earlier, getting the top, I don't see them getting any of the top 3 spots in this division. They would have to be 4th or 5th and getting a wild card in my mind if they're going to make the playoffs. But I don't see it happening for them this year. I don't think they made enough moves and got better enough to really, challenge for a playoff spot in the Western Conference this season. So looking at the number 5 team here, we're going to go with Eric's favorite team. I know, he's not a huge follower of hockey, but, I'm not sure how he's going to react to how low I have his team. But I have the Stars here at number 5. They did finish 4th in the division last year with 98 points. They were the first wild card in the playoff, but they did lose in the first round to the Calgary Flames in a thrilling Game 7. Really outstanding goaltending by the Dallas Stars in that game. I mean, he stood on his head for sure, and but what killed Dallas in that game and in that series was what killed them all last season, was just a lack of offensive production. Great defense, great goaltending, but not enough goals on the board, and that's what eventually killed them. Their last division crown was in 2015-16, and in that year they did lose in the second round of the St. Louis Blues. For me, I just think that lack of offensive production is going to catch up with them. I know they did bring in a couple pieces during the offseason to kind of add more scoring depth, but they did lose a big piece as well that, is one of their big scorers, which I'll get to that now. So bringing in scoring talent, they brought in Mason Marchment from the Florida Panthers. He was part of he was part of that Florida team last year that led the league in goals and had the top offense in hockey. So definitely a much needed piece here for the Dallas Stars. They need someone to help score goals. They need consistent offensive production if they're going to want to challenge for anything. But I said they gained, scoring production, but they also lost it. They lost John Klingberg. There was a lot of rumors swirling around all of last year that they were going to trade him. They had multiple trade partners. The Carolina Hurricanes were in the running for him at one point. There was a lot of rumors circulating around that they were going to trade for him. Eventually, he didn't end up getting traded, but he did get released this offseason. They didn't re-sign him, so that is a key kind of like offensive defenseman piece on their back end. Someone who runs their power play. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that goes this season when you bring in more forward talent to score goals, but you lose a bit of your offensive defensive production with Klingberg. So definitely going to be interesting to see there. They're most likely Hart Trophy candidate. I'm going with Jason Robertson. Is that his first name, Jason? I always forget. I can't remember if it's Jason or Jordan. Yeah, it's Jason Robertson. It's Jason Robertson. What am I saying? But yeah, Jason Robertson's going to be their most likely Hart Trophy candidate for me. He's a bright young star in the league. I think he was in contention for the Calder Trophy in his first year. Just a really, really bright young star. He's a American-born player. He, stepped in and produced right away for this team when he got drafted in the second round when he finally got into the starting lineup. So Jason Robertson's going to be the most likely Hart Trophy candidate for me for them. And on a side note, also for the Dallas Stars, that black jersey, that black and green, like neon green jersey that Jason Robertson is wearing in that picture, the Dallas Stars need to make that their official home uniform because that is the best jersey in the league right now, in my opinion. I don't know if everyone would agree with me on that, but in my opinion, the best jersey in the league right now is the Dallas Stars alternate that Jason Robertson's wearing in that picture. So make it happen, Dallas, because I'm really not a fan of their normal home jerseys. And, when it comes to their logo, I think they should go back to the old logo, but that jersey is pretty awesome, so make it happen. So before I move on to the number 4 team here, you'll see on the screen it is the Minnesota Wild. These next 3 teams were very, very hard to rank for me. And it's been very hard for the hockey analysts to rank as well. I was looking at different preseason rankings, and these next 3 teams were in all different orders. Like, I saw every single possible combination of these 3 teams, in whatever order. So these were really hard to rank. These could easily go either way. But at number 4, I'm going to have the Minnesota Wild. They were the runner-up in the division last year with 113 points before they lost in 6 games to the St. Louis Blues in the first round. The last division crown for the Minnesota Wild was in 2007-2008, but they did lose in the first round to the Colorado Avalanche that year. So, again, the Wild are another team that, it seems like the Wild, they seem to be this really good team every year, and they're like a perennial playoff team, but they can never make it past the first or second round. It's like they come into the playoffs with these expectations that they're going to do well, and then all of a sudden, everything collapses when the playoffs come around. So it'll be interesting to see what the Wild do this year. My problem with them is that just a lack of of bringing in new pieces in the offseason. They probably, in my opinion, had one of the worst free agencies out of all the teams. They did re-sign Marc-Andre Fleury, which was big for them. Fleury's still got it. He's getting older, but he does still have it. He's still a really good goaltender. But, on top of just re-signing pieces and extending, pieces on their team, they didn't bring anybody in. So that's where the big problem comes for me, especially when I was trying to find, their best offseason addition. I pretty much just had to go with their first-round draft pick, Liam Ogren, the Swedish-born player. Not sure how much playing time he's going to get this year. He's probably going to end up being an AHL player. So, again, the Wild really didn't bring anyone in, especially since they lost a really big key piece in the offseason being Kevin Fiala. He was an 80-point scorer last year, and a key part of that first line on this Wild team. So definitely really hurts to lose him, and that's why I have them 4th out of this group of teams. Again, I've seen people have them in third, some people have them in second still, but others have them in fourth. I'm going with them here in fourth just because I feel like out of the three teams, they didn't really get any better. I think they got a little bit worse actually. Whereas I think the other two teams, I think the Predators and the Blues at least got better or they stayed the same. So whereas the Wild I think got worse. So their Hart Trophy candidate is of course going to be Gabriel Kaprizov. Good news for him. He was able to make it back to the U.S. after he was stuck in Russia for a while because of everything that had been going on. But he is back in the U.S. now, and he's going to be fully ready and fully healthy to play for them this upcoming season. Another one of these bright young stars, an all-star last year. Definitely going to be key for him to, make up for the lack of production that they lost in Kevin Fiala. He's going to have to take on an even larger role than he already has. But he's a bright young superstar, and he definitely, it might not happen for him this year, but if the Wild get a few more pieces to put around him, I could definitely see Kaprizov being a future Hart Trophy winner for sure. So moving on to the number 3 team here, we're going to go with the Nashville Predators. They were 5th in the division last year with 97 points. They were the second wild card. They did get swept in the first round by the Colorado Avalanche, but, they were the Stanley Cup champions, so not a whole lot of shame there in my mind. Their last division crown came in 2018-2019, but they did lose in the first round to the Dallas Stars that year. The Nashville Predators, they're, for the most part, the same team. They did add a good key piece in the offseason that I'll get to here in a second. Roman Josi is a perennial Norris candidate. They did re-sign Philip Forsberg, which was huge for them. There was a lot of talk during the season, like, okay, this is like every team during the offseason, it feels like every team has at least one thing they need to get done, and the one thing they needed to get done was to re-sign Philip Forsberg, and they did just that. Like I said, Roman Josi is a perennial Norris candidate. UC Saros is a perennial Vezina candidate, so there's a lot of, really solid pieces on this team for sure. If they could just come together and, make another playoff run. It's been a little bit since they had a deep playoff run, since they lost that Stanley Cup Finals to the Pittsburgh Penguins. And they lost in the first round this year. They lost in the first round last year to the Carolina Hurricanes. So I know Nashville's hungry to get back to make another deep playoff run. But the key piece that they added in the offseason for me was the winger from Carolina, Nino Niederreiter. Being a Hurricanes fan, I was really sad to see him go. He was, out of all of our free agents, he was the one that I wanted us to re-sign the most. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. And Nashville was able to get him on a pretty good deal. He's a 20-goal scorer. He has been for, the past couple of years in his career. The only problem with him that I've definitely found is his playoff production has really not been the greatest in his time in Carolina. So it's going to be interesting to see if Nashville can get back to the playoffs, if he can, produce in the playoffs for them, because his playoff production in Carolina really wasn't the greatest. Their biggest loss for me was Nick Cousins. Just another depth player on their team. He's not a superstar or anything, so that's one of the reasons why I have the Predators elevated above the Wild, is because I think the Predators got better. They lost Cousins, but they bring in Niederreiter. They extend Forsberg. Niederreiter's an upgrade, so definitely a good move for the Predators there, and I think they got better. So for their Hart Trophy candidate, this was a tough one. I had to decide between Roman Josi and Philip Forsberg, but I'm going to go with Philip Forsberg just because it seems like it's really hard for a defenseman to get in the running for the Hart Trophy. It's definitely not impossible, and it can happen, but it's just difficult for a defenseman to get into the Hart Trophy race. So I'm going to go with their best forward, and that's Philip Forsberg. He's done great things for them. He's unfortunately done some bad things to my Hurricanes when I've seen us play against the Predators. So he's a really talented forward, and like I said, it was very important they got him locked up for the future, because he for sure could contend for the Hart Trophy if he can reach his true potential, especially with the defense that the Predators have behind him. He doesn't have to worry about stuff like that. Moving on to the number 2 team in this division is going to be the St. Louis Blues. They were 3rd in the division last year with 109 points. After then, they did lose in the second round to the Colorado Avalanche. They did give them a pretty decent series, a better series than I thought they were going to give them, but they did eventually lose. The last time they won the division was only 2 years prior, in the COVID-shortened season when they won the division there, but they did lose in the first round of the playoffs to the Vancouver Canucks. That was definitely a weird playoff year, given that a lot of these teams had been off for a while and they were trying to get back in a groove. So we saw a lot of upsets in the first round of the playoffs that year. But for me, the Blues, like I said, I think they got a little bit better. I don't think they got any worse, which is definitely, I think the goaltending situation is definitely a question. I guess I'll get to that here. Their biggest loss was definitely Ville Husso, who, was splitting time with Jordan Binnington during the playoffs. And I guess the Blues are counting on that Binnington's going to get back to that form that he had when they won the Stanley Cup in 2018-2019. And, it's going to be interesting to watch for sure when it comes to that, because if Binnington plays at the level that he can play at, then he's a Vezina candidate. Like, he won the Conn Smythe that year for a reason. He was a great goaltender for them. And, he just got to really get back into that form. And if he can, then I think the Blues are going to be more than okay. But, it's definitely a big question mark for them. I think that he can, which is why I have them in second here. Because if I didn't think he could do it, then I would have them in third below the Predators. But I think he's going to be able to do it. But Husso is still a huge loss for sure, especially if you don't have like one really solid goalie. Having two solid goalies is really good. Their best offseason addition for me, now this was a little bit unorthodox here because another team that really didn't add anything spectacular in the offseason. So I just went with the fact that they extended Robert Thomas. I thought that was huge for them to really lock up their first line center, get him extended so that way, it was the same deal with what the Predators had with Philip Forsberg, make sure you lock him up to a long-term deal. He's going to make a nice deadly pairing on that first line with Tarasenko and Buchnevich. Buchnevich really had a good resurgence last year. He was probably the best player on the Blues last year was Buchnevich. So that first line is going to be deadly with Buchnevich, Thomas, and Tarasenko. And speaking of Tarasenko, he's their candidate for me for the Hart Trophy. I said I definitely had a couple options here between Thomas and Buchnevich and Tarasenko, but I went with Tarasenko, another guy that was linked to the Hurricanes a little bit during the offseason. It sounded like the Blues might trade him, but they didn't, and it's good that they didn't because he's a really talented player. He got a lot of key goals for them in the playoffs. When they were struggling against Colorado, Tarasenko really stepped up and got them back in those games. So Tarasenko for me is going to be their Hart Trophy candidate. And of course, finally, no surprise, at the top of this division is going to be the reigning Stanley Cup champion Colorado Avalanche. They were first in this division, of course, last year with 119 points. Last playoff season and last division crown were last year, and they were Stanley Cup champs. So, not a whole lot to say about the Colorado Avalanche here. They're still basically the same team as last year. They did lose a pretty key piece, but they should be fine. They're going to be up there contending for the Stanley Cup again. So speaking of the piece they lost, they did lose Nazem Kadri. He did sign with the Calgary Flames, so definitely a bit of a blow there for them. He was a bit of a playoff hero. He got the game-winning goal in the deciding game in that Game 5 down in was it Game 5? No, it was Game 4 down in Tampa. He got the game-winning goal for them, so definitely a big loss for them for sure, losing Kadri, but they definitely have enough people behind Kadri to make up for it. They still have Nathan McKinnon is still a perennial Hart Trophy candidate and a perennial All-Star. Gabriel Landeskog is a very underrated captain in my opinion. And of course Cale Makar is the reigning Conn Smythe and reigning Norris Trophy winner, so a lot of talent behind that, to make up for the loss of Nazem Kadri. Their big addition during the offseason for me is going to be Alexander Georgiev. He was the backup to Igor Shesterkin in New York last year, and it's really going to be interesting to watch, what they have going on at the goalie position this year, because they did let go of Darcy Kemper. So Francouz, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but Pavel Francouz is slated to step into the starting role. He did a really good job in the games that Kemper didn't play. But Georgiev is also a really solid backup. I've seen enough of him being a Canes fan. We played the Rangers 4 times last year, and Georgiev actually had a shutout against us. So Georgiev's a very solid backup for them for sure. So hopefully this is what's going to really once and for all, solve the goaltending woes that the Colorado Avalanche have been having. But like I said, there's a lot of talent on this team. McKinnon, Landeskog, Mikko Rantanen, Arturi Lankinen, Cale Makar. A lot of choices that I had here for a potential Hart Trophy candidate. I know the smart money that a lot of people would go with is Nathan McKinnon, but I'm actually going to go. I know I just talked about this with the Predators, that it's hard for a defenseman to, get into the Hart Trophy race, but I'm going to go with Cale Makar. He's just been absolutely outstanding for them. He really carried them through the playoffs as well. Him and McKinnon really just were the main driving forces. He won the Conn Smythe Trophy, just came off his first Norris Trophy win, and he's still very young as well, so definitely a lot of great things in the future for Cale Makar, and I could definitely see him pushing for the Hart Trophy. If it's not him and I'm wrong, then it would be Nathan McKinnon, but I'm going to stick to my guns and say Cale Makar, and the Colorado Avalanche for sure are in a great position to once again challenge for the Stanley Cup Championship. But that's going to be it for this first episode of the NHL previews with the Central Division. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you let me know down in the comments below if you agree with my picks, disagree with my picks. Do you think the Avalanche are more vulnerable this year? Do you think someone else could take the division? Do you think there's, one of my lower teams could surprise a lot of people? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We finished up our NFL preview, so got a little bit less content coming out on the channel now than we were having a couple of weeks ago, but we still have content coming out for you guys, so make sure you guys stay tuned in. And until then, I will see you guys next time for the Pacific Division.